Years after the rupture, the world is plagued by demonic, human-eating creatures called the Burned Ones. In response, a cult emerges, believing that speech is a sin. The cult members go to extreme lengths, removing their vocal cords to ensure silence. Azrael and 𝐃𝐞𝐦𝐿 escape from this cult and now survive alone in the forest. One day, Azrael hears a noise in the trees, triggering her anxiety. Reacting quickly, she puts out the fire 𝐃𝐞𝐦 started, her fear almost overwhelming her. So 𝐃𝐞𝐦 tries to comfort her with affection. In gratitude, Azrael gives 𝐃𝐞𝐦 a bracelet she made from branches and plants. Just then they hear the noise again, it's whistling, a sign that the cult members are closing in. Realizing the danger, they decide to split up, running in opposite directions. Unfortunately, Azrael is quickly spotted by a cult member who chases her down. When she tries to double back, another member ambushes her, delivering a blow to her stomach that leaves her weakened. As they drag her through the woods, Azrael's heart sinks when she sees that 𝐃𝐞𝐦 has also been captured. When they reach the road, 𝐃𝐞𝐦 attempts to break free, but the cult members quickly threaten him with a machete. Both he and Azrael are forced into the trunks of separate cars. As they drive away, the road eventually splits, and Azrael's heart sinks when she sees the vehicles heading in different directions. Desperate, she pounds on the trunk, but it won't budge. Moments later, the car stops, and the cultists pull her out, leading her to a spot deep in the woods where more cult members, including one of the leaders, Josephine, are waiting. Azrael is tied to a chair, and Josephine makes a deliberate cut on her leg, drawing blood for a ritual sacrifice. The wind picks up, making the bottles hanging in the trees clink eerily. The cultists step back and begin panting loudly, their form of a silent chant. Soon, a burned one emerges from the forest, roaring as it approaches Azrael. Terrified, Azrael desperately pulls at her restraints until she manages to snap one of the chair's armrests. A cultist rushes over to stop her, but in the struggle, she accidentally stabs him in the neck with the broken wood. The man staggers back, only for the burned one to pounce on him and begin devouring him. In shock, Azrael uses her free hand to unfasten the remaining straps, finally breaking free. As Josephine and the other cultists remain focused on their ritual, they fail to notice her escape until it's too late. The burned one drags the dead man's body away. Later, Azrael stops by a river to clean her injury. She also finds some herbs that she wraps around it. Azrael hears a burned one creeping up behind her. Acting quickly, she darts into a nearby abandoned building, hiding in the darkest corner she can find. The burned one searches inside, but unable to see her, eventually gives up and leaves. Relieved, Azrael heads back to the road and follows tire tracks to the cult's camp. She sneaks around the perimeter and finds a concealed spot in the fence that she carefully opens. Moving quietly, she watches the guards, slipping past them unnoticed. While hiding behind a car, she spots 𝐃𝐞𝐦𝐿's bracelet lying near some chains, fearing the worst. Just then, Josephine and her followers return, prompting Azrael to keep out of sight as she spies on them. She hides behind a tent and watches as Josephine tends to a sick old woman. Josephine enters the chapel, where the cultists are gathered around their leader, Miriam. Despite being pregnant, Miriam participates in a ritual where she listens to the wind blowing through a hole, believing it to be the voice of God. After several minutes, she extinguishes the altar candles, signaling the ritual's end, and the cultists leave. Josephine stays behind, allowing Miriam to slap her as punishment for the failed ritual in the forest. Their tense moment is interrupted by a noise outside. Miriam peers out the window but sees nothing, as Azrael has hidden under the building just in time. Josephine steps out to investigate, forcing Azrael to move stealthily to avoid detection. Just when Azrael thinks she's safe, Josephine suddenly appears beside her, grabbing her legs to prevent her escape. Josephine attacks Azrael, choking her, but Azrael fights back, shoving her off and kicking her in the face. In desperation, Azrael runs through the camp, trying to avoid detection. Josephine rings a bell, alerting the entire cult to the intruder, and soon the air is filled with the clanging of bottles and pans. Azrael is spotted by a few cultists who begin chasing her, forcing her to rush to the fence. She tears her hands on the barbed wire as she frantically opens the hidden hole and squeezes through. Just as she's almost free, her foot gets caught, and a man grabs it, trying to pull her back. She kicks him and gets her leg out, finally makes her escape. Another cultist fires a shot, but the bullet misses, striking a tree, allowing Azrael to flee. Azrael sprints through the woods as darkness falls, exhaustion weighing heavily on her. Her open wounds leave a trail of blood on the rocks and trees, attracting the attention of a burned one that begins to follow the scent. When she sees it licking her blood off a rock, panic grips her, and she bolts again as the creature chases her. To make matters worse, a second burned one joins the pursuit. Just when all seems lost, the first burned one trips and falls, giving Azrael a crucial moment to reach the road unscathed. Suddenly, headlights pierce the darkness, and she stumbles as a massive truck approaches, screeching to a halt just in time. The driver steps out, and after recovering from the shock of seeing her, he asks if she's a survivor, helping her to her feet. Azrael is disoriented and struggles to answer the driver's questions, instead climbing into the truck and pounding on it, urging him to drive away. He quickly returns to the wheel and drives through the night, handing her a cloth to help with her wound while explaining that he lives at the end of the road, where he has plenty of food. Unable to understand his language, Azrael shows him the cross-shaped scar on her neck, trying to convey that she can't speak. The man, however, doesn't grasp her meaning and continues to talk, but eventually gives up and turns on the radio. Azrael is captivated by the music playing. They barely travel a few miles when suddenly, a bullet strikes the driver in the head. A cultist stands in the middle of the road, firing more shots, but they all miss as the truck swerves out of control. Azrael lunges to take control of the wheel, but the driver's body blocks her, causing the truck to run over the cultist before crashing into a wall. After several minutes of unconsciousness, she awakens in a daze, blood streaming from her head. Stumbling out of the truck, she falls to her knees in pain and notices that the cultist is still alive. Fueled by adrenaline, she leaps onto him, grappling for the gun. They struggle fiercely, and in the chaos, they accidentally fire the weapon, sending them rolling into the forest. When they separate, the cultist attempts to shoot her again, only to realize he's out of bullets. In desperation, he swings the gun at her legs. Seizing the moment, Azrael spots the fallen magazine nearby and strikes him on the head with it several times before finally kicking him off her. Azrael crawls toward the gun and manages to load it, but just as she's about to take aim, the cultist grabs her from behind, trying to choke her. In a desperate struggle, she positions the gun and fires, finally killing him. Breathing heavily, she wanders through the forest, gripping the gun tightly. Suddenly, she spots a fire near a tree and approaches cautiously, only to be horrified to discover it's Keenan, nailed to the tree. As she moves closer, she accidentally triggers a trap, and a rope ensnares her leg, leaving her dangling upside down from a branch. A cultist appears and snatches the gun from her, striking Keenan with it. Just then, the wind picks up, causing a distraction. Azrael tries to climb the rope to free herself, but the strain only worsens her injuries. When she looks down again, the cultist has vanished. Suddenly, the cultist is slammed against a tree by a burned one, which begins to feast on him. As a second burned one joins in to help its companion, Azrael, filled with desperation, tries to climb the rope again, ignoring the excruciating pain in her hands. She finally reaches the top just in time to see a third burned one join the others, all ravenously feeding on the cultist. Once they finish, one of the creatures drags the body away, while the second one lunges for Keenan, sinking its teeth into him as well. After taking a few bites, it carries Keenan's body off, and the third beast starts climbing up the tree toward her. Realizing she needs to free herself, Azrael stops to remove the rope from her leg, giving the burned one time to catch up. With impressive strength, it pushes her against the branch, preparing to bite her. In a last-ditch effort, Azrael wraps the rope around its neck and pushes it off the tree, tumbling down after it. Azrael survives the fall, but the burned one lies dead, hanging from the rope. Later, she makes her way back to the cultist camp, armed with the gun. Hiding behind a tree, she whistles to mimic a cultist, successfully luring Josephine and a small group of followers into the woods to investigate. With the path clear, Azrael sneaks into the camp through the same hole in the fence as before. Cautiously, she enters the chapel and finds Miriam, who flaunts her pregnant belly, trying to project weakness. Just as Azrael hesitates to shoot, Miriam swiftly disarms her, striking her on the head with a pan. As Azrael falls, she instinctively scratches Miriam's belly in a desperate act. Later, Josephine and her group drag Azrael into the forest, forcing her to a grave. They smear her blood on their faces while listening to the wind, then toss her into a casket, quickly sealing it with dirt. Panicking, Azrael starts pounding on the wood, but no one comes to her aid. After the burial is complete, a lantern flickers to life at Azrael's feet, illuminating a tunnel connected to the casket. Grabbing the lantern, she crawls into the tunnel, only to encounter a burned one at the back. Panicking, she quickly turns and scrambles back toward the casket, the creature hot on her heels and soon crawling over her. Instead of attacking, the burned one sniffs her hand and detects the scent of Miriam's blood, roaring in approval before leaving her alone. Relieved, Azrael gathers her courage and tries the tunnel again, successfully making her escape this time. Moments later, Josephine rushes out of the chapel upon hearing a commotion, only to be horrified to find that the tent housing the old lady is ablaze. A cultist raises the alarm as others scramble to extinguish the flames, but it's too late. The old lady is dead, and the fire spreads rapidly through the camp. This chaos gives Azrael the perfect opportunity to stealthily move around, picking off cult members one by one with her gun. Josephine watches in horror, attempting to escape, but Azrael shoots her in the stomach, ensuring a slow, painful death. As panic ensues and cultists flee in every direction, the fire reaches a gas canister, igniting a small explosion that further intensifies the chaos. One devastated man, discovering his girlfriend has been shot, picks up a gun, determined to fight back. He exchanges shots with Azrael as they both maneuver through the burning camp. Amid the destruction, he becomes disoriented, hearing whistling echoing from multiple corners, adding to his confusion and fear. Believing Azrael is toying with him, the man fires at the first shadow he sees, only to realize he's just killed a fellow cultist. The shock immobilizes him, and Azrael seizes the moment, launching a surprise attack and decapitating him with a machete. She then re-enters the chapel, where Miriam leaps onto her from behind, disarming Azrael with her own blade. The two engage in a frantic chase around the room, with Miriam clearing benches in her path to catch Azrael. Finally, she pushes Azrael against a table, attempting to decapitate her, but Azrael kicks her off, using the momentum to dodge Miriam's next attack. In a swift move, Azrael pushes Miriam against the wall and bites her neck. As Miriam grapples with the pain, her water breaks, adding to the chaos. Suddenly, a shot rings out as Josephine fires at the chapel's cross. Josephine continues firing her gun as she approaches Azrael, but she abruptly stops when she sees Miriam giving birth on her bed. Seizing the distraction, Azrael tackles Josephine to the ground, shattering a nearby bench in the process. Both women struggle, each breaking pieces of wood over the other. Josephine then pulls out a small blade, but Azrael blocks the attack and slams Josephine's head onto a bench before releasing her. Next, Azrael grabs Miriam's knife and strikes Josephine in the neck. At that moment, the sound of a baby crying fills the room. Josephine removes the knife from her neck, collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Miriam, emerging from the bed in terror, grabs Azrael's machete and takes her own life in a shocking act of despair. Suddenly, a powerful wind sweeps through the chapel, extinguishing all the candles. A horde of burned ones storms through the forest and into the camp before entering the chapel, where Azrael cradles the baby in her arms. To her shock, she discovers the child resembles a goat, evoking the imagery of the Antichrist. The burned ones roar in reverence, acknowledging their new leader. A smile spreads across Azrael's face as she realizes the immense power she now wields. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.